All right, welcome everyone. Let folks get settled in and get started here shortly. Welcome, welcome. As you come into the room, if you would like to introduce yourself by adding your name, pronouns, and if you're representing an organization, you can add that too into the chat. Just a note, you should have got a pop-up, but this meeting is being recorded.
Ugh. Where is that? Simply.
All right, a few more people have joined. Welcome. Thanks for joining us tonight. We will get started shortly. But if you do want to introduce yourself, if you can put your name, pronouns, and if you're representing an organization into the chat. We will give it just a few more minutes, let people come in the door, get settled in. All right, I do want to give it just another minute and let people come in. Okay, well, I think I'll get us kicked off. Welcome. Thank you, everyone, for joining. My name is Wayne Grabowski. My pronouns are he or they, and I support community engagement efforts across the Bureau at Bureau of Planning and Sustainability here at the city. I'm going to pop the agenda for tonight's event into the chat there. Do want to let you know, make sure that you know that this is being recorded and live streamed on YouTube. You can turn on the captions if you float over your screen and get a pop-up menu at the bottom. And if you click on the three dots and more button, you'll see captions. It allows you to turn on captions from there. And with that, Ariel, do you want to get us started?
All right, sorry for that. Yes, hi. I will just introduce myself and then I'll let Tom go and introduce himself. So my name's Ariel Kane. I'm an economic planner here at the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. I have been supporting the team on the housing needs analysis as well as the housing production strategy, which we'll be talking about tonight.
Yes, good evening, everyone. I'm Tom Armstrong. I'm a supervising planner here at BPS, and I manage our housing and economic policy team. And we do the long-range growth forecasting for the city that feeds into many of our planning projects. And that's sort of what's coming out of this in terms of the housing needs analysis and the housing production strategy. Tonight, we're going to give you a little bit of an overview of the Portland's housing needs, the growth forecast and needs analysis that was adopted by council last December that serves as the basis for the production strategy. And then we'll talk a little bit about what is the production strategy and what kinds of things have we been coming up with in terms of working across the city, the many different city bureaus. And then we want to hear from you and talk about what are the most important housing issues in Portland that we should be addressing, what may be missing from our strategy, and other housing issues that we want to address through this process. So we're looking for your input and your discussion. We'll also provide links to other ways that you can provide us input over the next couple of weeks, and also talk a little bit about the next steps as we move through. We have a planning commission meeting coming up at the end of May. And then eventually this production strategy document will be adopted by council later this summer. So with that, and we'll pause from time to time for questions and before we get into the discussion. But I think with that, I'm going to turn things over to Ariel to just give us an overview of the needs analysis.
Great. Thank you, Tom. Yeah, so I'll just talk a little bit about the numbers part. So this sets the stage for the housing production strategy in terms of showcasing, what we're aiming for in the housing production strategy. So as part of the housing needs analysis that was adopted in 2023, we identified that we need to produce between 97,000 units and 120,000 new housing units. So this incorporates a forecast from the Metro Regional Distributed Forecast that we're required to utilize as our base. We also looked at a healthy vacancy rate, and we tried to accommodate the new Oregon Housing Needs Analysis methodology and tried to be early adopters of that methodology, which utilizes a few extra factors. So accounts for second home or vacation home loss, as well as underproduction of units. So if between 2010 and 2021, we produced units at the same rate as the nation, how many additional units would we have produced, as well as trying to account for our most acute existing need, which is for our existing houseless households. And so that bumps us up from that 97,000 units to 120,000 units needed in 2045. The state asks us to look at a number of different factors, the key one being who is our housing affordable to? And so when we look at those 120,000 units and we distribute them across our sort of expected income affordability level, we use the Portland Metro Regional Area Median Income we expect that about 53% of our new housing units will need to be affordable to our very low to low income households, so earning less than 80% AMI. It's about 63,000 units over the next 20 years, needing to be affordable at that level. We want to maintain income diversity, so we also know that we have a need for housing units to be built at all levels of affordability. So that does include that 80 to 120% AMI, which we often call middle income or workforce income housing, as well as our higher income households who are earning 120% and above. We look at a number of other factors because we know that housing isn't just about producing every housing unit exactly the same. We know we have different household needs. So in addition to the level of affordability, we're also considering the structure, how it's built, and who it's accommodating. So we know we have households within our community who have members with disabilities who need accessible housing units. We have households with children or larger families that need access to larger housing units, so that 2 or more bedrooms. And we also know we have households with older adults. And so again, considering how our housing units and our new housing units in particular are allowing our households to age in place. These numbers aren't stackable numbers. We know that there's a lot of intersectionality within our numbers, that there are households who have children and disabilities. Multi-generational households exist. So this is just one snapshot, one way of looking at our future housing need and how we should be considering planning for the future. So that 120,000 units means that we have to produce over the next 20 so years, about 5,000 to 6,000 new housing units every year. How does that compare to recent production? It's a bit of a stretch goal. The pink line here indicates that indicates where we would need to be producing in order to meet that forecasted demand. And we've only hit that a few times in the last couple of years. So the housing production strategy sort of highlights the importance of creating an environment that producing more units will be possible to really meet the need of our community over the next decades. So those were more about the demand side, what we expect our households to need. What we also need to understand is where or if we have the capacity to develop new housing units. We do. We have excess housing capacity based on our buildable lands inventory. With our demand being 120,000 housing units, we estimate that we have capacity based on our zoning as well as market factors for about double that, about 237,000 housing units would be possible to be built, given current market factors and those current zoning standards. So the map on the right shows our residential capacity by units per acre in transportation area zones, TAZ. So this showcases with the darker colors as well as the taller spikes where more units are possible to develop. A lot of that is towards our central city, our southwest, as well as towards the east and along our centers and corridors. You can see in the interstate corridor up in the north that there's additional capacity as well. This aligns neatly with our Portland growth strategy, the map on the left, which showcases our centers and corridors plan, where we hope to promote development in areas that have access to opportunity, good access to transit and services. And this is my last slide on numbers, and then we'll pause for questions if you have any, but this is just another way of looking at those two different numbers, the 120,000 housing units and the 237,000 that we have capacity for. So as the map showed, there's a variety of different capacity in different areas. This is just lumping them into districts. So the dark blue along the bottom shows our demand. So if the last 20 years is an indicator of how growth would occur, this is what the next 20 years distribution would look like. So it shows that we have higher demand in Central City, Southeast, and North Portland, and a little less, but still some demand in East, Northeast, and West Portland as well. The top buckets show if we built all of that housing in the dark blue, what additional capacity do we have for units? So every district has additional capacity for developing housing units, with some having a little bit more constrained areas. So Central City, Southeast, East Portland, again, have both the most demand, but also the most capacity for development, whereas North and Northeast and West Portland have a little bit more constraint in terms of development capacity right now. And so I'm going to pause. Tom, if you have anything to add, or if we have any questions that came up.
No, I don't have anything to add just yet.
If individuals have questions, you can place them in the chat at any time and we'll make sure they're answered. Or if you have questions during our Q&A portions, feel free to raise your virtual hand, your digital hand, which you can find by hovering over your screen, seeing that pop-up menu at the bottom, and then clicking on reactions. You'll see the raise hand button. We have a question in the chat. How is the demand by geography in the city defined or determined?
Great question. Yeah, so it's determined by the methodology we used in the 2045 housing needs analysis. Primarily, when we're looking at it by geography, we're looking at the demand from the last 20 years. So that measure was based on permitting, so units produced over the last 20 years by geography.
I think it's also important to note that this forecast and this look at development patterns and capacity is something that the city is going to monitor, and we have to go through this needs analysis production strategy every 6 years. So we're able to make mid-course corrections as we go along to check that the trends and the patterns that we're seeing and compare that to available capacity. I think just there's another, oh, the hand went down, but there's another, the regions align with the neighborhood coalition boundaries. And that, yeah, the East region, that East Portland neighborhood coalition boundary sort of wiggles and varies along I-205 in the north and 82nd Avenue in the south. But generally it's east of 82nd Avenue.
There are a few questions above that. I know Jennifer had their hand raised. The question is, I'm curious how preservation and redevelopment plays into the production conversation.
Yeah, I think it plays in, and you'll see it play in two different ways. In terms of preservation, that is a strategy, especially in terms of preserving existing affordable housing, and some of the steps that we can take to help sort of protect what we have. But in terms of redevelopment, as part of that buildable land inventory housing capacity analysis, that we do look at sort of the value of property and the value of existing improvements and compare that to what is allowed sort of under current zoning, in terms of being able to identify lower value sites that could be potentially redeveloped in the future. And that's sort of what goes into this capacity analysis, because we don't have a lot of vacant sites in Portland. We're a pretty built out city. And so we do assume quite a bit of, and we have seen quite a bit of redevelopment, especially along our commercial neighborhood business district corridors, where you see a 1-story building replaced by a 4 or 5-story apartment building.
Thank you. Pardon me. And I do see Ariel responded to Jim's question regarding the number of households with people with disabilities. Thank you.
All right, why don't we dig into the housing production strategy? So this is a bit of a new requirement by the state, in past, and what we did as part of the 2016 2035 comprehensive plan update is cities used to just have to compare their future growth forecast to their expected development capacity, and if they matched, or you can show that we assume that we have excess development capacity. Cities were pretty much, that's where most people stopped. Then, with over the last 5 or 6 years in the legislature and at the city level, as the focus on housing production, the state now requires all cities in Oregon to come up with an implementation strategy, or essentially a 5-year action plan of what what measures are you going to take to realize that expected housing growth, and what steps can cities take to support that development. And the city of Portland has done a lot already in terms of that, and so we're looking at and we're building off of that base and trying to identify what is essentially a 5-year work program that will actions that we can undertake, and you'll see the range that we're coming up with, to help support this production. And as I said, the state is going to require us to do this every 6 years. There's also a 3-year progress report or check-in, where we need to, update our trends, show what we've done, actions that we've taken, make some mid-course corrections, maybe new issues emerge that we need to address. So this is really going to be sort of part of a continuing conversation about housing in Portland. Let's go to the next slide. So a little bit about our process and where we're at. We've had the draft strategy document available since late February, early March. BPS has been out in the community doing a series of meetings and presentations. We've done some focus groups, particularly with different BIPOC and language groups, working with our outreach team at the city. And now in April and through mid-April, we'll be continuing that outreach process. We have an online community survey up and available for folks. And as we begin to look at the comments and think about it and work with our other partners within the city, we're going to begin to make some changes and revisions to these strategies. And then, as I said earlier, come out and have a planning commission meeting on May 28th. And that'll be another opportunity for public comment. And then coming out of that into June, making additional revisions. And then again, towards the end of June, early July, publishing the version of the production strategy that will go to council. Council will hold another public hearing before adopting it, and then we'll send it on to the state, the Department of Land Conservation and Development, for their review to make sure we did it right and according to the state rules. As I said, we've been doing a lot of outreach presentations in the community to get feedback on these draft strategies, and that work is continuing. And just we're going to have more opportunities, and as we go through the process, we're going to get feedback from our planning commission and then eventually city council. So as we get into this tonight and talk about the different strategies, we want to know from you. We're looking from you. You know, what are the most important housing issues that we should be addressing, and then we want to know, especially if is anything missing. And then, as I said, we're working from a lot of existing programs, and policies, and particularly from your insights, if you think any of those are particularly effective. It's not just about new programs and new actions, but it's also about, doubling down on stuff that's working already. Next slide, please. So in terms of a strategy, what are we looking at? Again, it's sort of more about a work program, and we want to tailor these to address a specific housing need. We're looking at how they serve different income levels, and again, what Ariel was talking about, those different types of housing needs. And this is the wide range. It can be about renters, it can be about home ownership, it can be about low income housing, it can be about market rate housing. Some of the things that we need to get into, and as part of that sort of what is important question, is we need to begin to set some priorities. We already have, and as you'll see, we already have some things in progress that we're going to be able to accomplish in the next 6 to 9 months. But then what do we look at? What should be addressing next, as staff resources and funding becomes available? What should be next in the queue? So in terms of organization, we've organized the strategies into 8 different categories. We have a focus on promoting and producing more affordable housing. That's housing that is affordable to people earning less than 80% area median income. We also have a bundle of strategies around increasing home ownership, and a bundle of strategies around increasing access to opportunity. And in that sense, by opportunity, we mean areas that already have a lot of community amenities, things that people need as part of their daily living. In Portland policy context, we call these complete neighborhoods. But those are areas that already have parks and grocery stores and access to transit and bikeways, and areas where we've already made a lot of infrastructure investment that we should be looking to increase housing density, increasing the number of housing units and the range of housing types in those areas that are already well served. The category 4 is about permitting. We've done a lot of work lately on reducing the barriers to development, streamlining the permitting process, trying to make that development review process go quicker. We're right in the middle of implementing what's called the single permitting authority, a major restructuring of the city bureaucracy that reviews development permits. And we're going to have to continue to improve that process. So we have a number of actions related to that. We also know that again, it's not all about when you look at the range of housing issues in Portland, it's not all about new production, but there's a bit about stabilizing current households, and avoiding the displacement of our current households. And so we have a range of strategies that get into that stabilization or that anti-displacement. We have two bundles here around, specific housing types. As Ariel noted in the needs, we have a aging population in Portland, in Oregon, and across the country. And we know that we're going to need to encourage accessible, visitable housing, single level living, housing that is appropriate for people that may have difficulties getting around, mobility difficulties. We also, recognize, and we have lots of programs around climate friendly and healthy homes and adapting to our changing climate, with things like air conditioning and heat pumps and energy efficiency and insulation programs. So we have a suite of policies and strategies around that. And finally, the last category is, we know the city can't do this alone. We need help from the state of Oregon and from the federal government in terms of funding, in terms of regulations and legislation changes. Sometimes some of the things that we want to do, we need authorizing legislation from the state. And so we're beginning to build our list of policy issues that we want to advocate, and work with our other government partners to support the housing strategy itself. Next slide, please. So again, and Ariel will put in the chat more links to all of these documents and opportunities to be able to provide comment to us. As I said, we do have a survey out there. There's a number of different ways that you can provide comment on the discussion draft. You can always email us, and there's the project email. And we'll continue to sort of update all of you as this goes forward, and reminders about the Planning Commission meetings and the upcoming council meetings. And I think, again, sort of where we're headed with this over the next 4 or 5 months. And so I think with that, we can turn to some of the questions. It looks like there's a bunch of questions in the chat.
There are, and first I want to, Eric had his hand up. I want to make sure that question was answered, and then we'll dive into the chat.
Hi, sorry, I was trying to find my unmute button. So I think this is great. I really appreciate the city have taken really great steps to support the housing development in Portland. One thing that I would advocate for, and I'm not sure this is something the city already considering, but when it comes to housing production strategy, I wonder if there's an opportunity to do an inventory of BIPOC contractor who would benefit from the opportunity to engage in the work. Like a lot of them, a lot of Latino, African American, and Asian contractors have great skills, exceptional, services, and they are, looking for opportunity to be a part of it. And this is just really an economic, equity approach. But I don't know if the city has considering that. For example, just working with the Portland Housing Bureau to preserve affordable housing, maintenance, repair, whatever that the needs are. Maybe considering having or prioritizing low income immigrant BIPOC community who are contractors. The second is that I think in my personal experience, looking for information and communicating with uh, the city to build an ADU, it takes more than a month or 2 months to schedule like an appointment with like a zoning code planner. And I do speak English, but even then, I have a hard time understanding everything. And we have a huge number of people of color who are owners, like homeowners. And I wonder, is there an opportunity to even expand the outreach education to these uh, homeowners who are, who identify as, BIPOC communities, to give them more information so that they can make informed decision about building an ADU that will help the housing stock in the city as well. That's just my 2 cents, and I'm pretty sure the city is probably considering those. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. Both two good issues that I heard there. In terms of contractor support and specifically BIPOC contractor support, I mean, I think most of the city's efforts so far have been through the Portland Clean Energy Fund and trying to stand up both contractors and a workforce that can do the type of energy efficiency upgrades, the solar panel upgrades, the housing or the heating and air conditioning system installations. And I think that's where most of that work has been focused. And also in terms of the trades, a lot of that work has been focused on sort of the workforce training end of things. I want to say that Prosper Portland had been looking at or trying to stand up a program around supporting contractors in general and helping them grow their business. We have a couple of good examples of where contractors over time, as they've gotten pieces of projects, have been able to really grow their businesses and become very large construction companies. But we'll take that back and add that to the list. And then your comments about ADUs is well taken in terms of that sort of education and understanding. And how do you do this? How do I build one? How do I finance it? How do I become a landlord? All of that gets mixed in there. And I think that is also another great opportunity for that infill housing development in there. Who's next?
Great, thank you. Yeah, I'll take it from the top. So Jim asked, how have you reached out to those most at risk of displacement? What have you heard from them?
Yeah, I think we have been trying to on two levels. I think our or three levels really. We've been reaching out by geography and going to the different neighborhood coalitions, the East Portland Action Plan, and then also working or reaching out and connecting with some of the community groups that work with people that are most at risk of displacement, to really, sort of, I guess, dig into the various housing programs that we have, especially in the range of the stabilization programs, the utility assistance, the home repair programs, the down payment assistance programs, to get feedback from them. And then, as I mentioned, we've been doing, we at the city have what we call a community engagement liaison program, which are native language speakers in the community. And we've been working with them to hold these focus groups so that we can do meetings and presentations in Spanish, in Chinese, in Russian, to really get at our people that may even not even speak English, or English is a second language, and to really sort of get deeper into those communities to understand their situations. I think what I've been hearing in the meetings that I've been going to is, again, a couple of things. I think, overall affordability and rent levels. I think also safety, safety in the community, safety on transit, but a general sort of concern about safety. And then, and I think we touched on this earlier, just a desire for larger units with more bedrooms for families, for multi-generational families, families with children, and really, and I think this sort of both bears it out in what we've been seeing in the development patterns. A lot of studio and one bedroom units have been built in Portland. I think our challenge is how do we encourage more 2 and 3 bedroom and larger units, that is a challenge in the marketplace. And so what incentives can the city bring to bear to encourage more of that? Ariel, is there any other points that you would add from the meetings you've been at? Okay.
Thank you. Next, Kayla, my apologies. How is the city going to encourage vacant property development? And then give some examples for sites that haven't seen any signs of development.
Yeah, that's a really tricky problem. The city can't really force a property owner into doing something with their property that they don't want to. I think what we're trying to look at, and what we're continually looking at is sort of what is the cost to develop? How does that compare to the price levels or rent levels? Is development feasible? Last year and just effective as of March 1st this year, we did do another look at what's called our inclusionary housing program. That's where we require developers to set aside 10 or 20% of the units in larger housing projects to be affordable at that sort of less than 80% income level. And we offer in exchange for that, we also we offer a bundle of incentives. And we went back through and looked at those incentives to figure out that do those incentives offset the cost of compliance with these programs and requirements. And we made adjustments, and we went to the county. We're now offering a more generous 10-year property tax abatement for many of these larger projects, especially the larger projects in the inner neighborhoods that ring the central city. So I think what we're trying to do is look at the range of incentives for projects that make it feasible for people to develop, that will hopefully encourage or spur people on to sort of activate some of these vacant sites that have long been vacant sites. But in terms of what's under the city's control, that's about the best that we can do. Occasionally when we do have money, we might go out and buy a site, especially for affordable housing. But there again, we need to have a willing seller on the other end of that transaction.
Thanks, Tom. Next, I see Donna, you have some comments.
Yeah, hi, thanks. I have a few things to say. And Tom, I hope we don't shy away from some of the novel and I think positive suggestions in the plan. So, for example, the land value tax, which I have read about, and which recently the League of Women Voters had a webinar, a panel discussion on housing, and Representative Gamba mentioned that as well. I think that's one thing that should be looked at to encourage development of properties that are just sitting there appreciating for the owners. and not doing anything else for the rest of us. So I'm excited by the plan because you have thrown in everything, including the kitchen sink. I mean, it's a really broad-based approach, um, looking at, a whole host of levers to increase our supply. And I'm cautiously optimistic because clearly, a lot of them right now are kind of roughly sketched in, but they are there. So I hope to see these ideas developed much, much more as we go ahead. I think you set an ambitious time frame for doing that. Um, but there's a lot to work with there, and I would like to see that. Um, I'd like to mention, I didn't find the survey to be all that helpful. I would encourage people to use the Map app. If you're not familiar with that, it's on your website. It's a link to where you can just put your comments in. You could either write them in or you can copy and paste them in. And you can see everybody else's comments and you can go right to the heart of what it is you want to say. I did put in a comment about, and I've spoken now to Prosper Portland about looking at an area in St. John's that was left out of the interstate TIF, and that for various reasons, which I won't take the time to go into now, but I wrote it into my comment in the Map app that should be looked at to be a small TIF. It would be really helpful. I chair a housing interest group with the League of Women Voters in Portland. We have now a little subgroup of 3 of us that are taking a deep dive into the housing production strategy. We're making a list of our questions and which ones we're going to email to you, Tom and Ariel, and which ones we want to maybe do a little Zoom call with. Maybe we'd like you to come to our housing interest group and talk about some of these questions that we have and some of your thoughts on the plan. And I'll just mention one other thing as an example of just kind of an interesting little section that we had a question about. So under section E1A, we talk about preserving affordable housing and creating an inventory of regulated and unregulated housing. And then in section F1, about accessibility, and again, estimating the accessible stock that we currently have. In both of those cases, you talk about doing the inventories, but we were really puzzled because the impact effect that was indicated was low. And we thought, how can you say that the impact would be low when you haven't done the inventory yet? In other words, if we don't know how much affordable housing we have, we don't know how much accessible housing we have, how do we know, how can we estimate the impact that we'll have? So that's one of the questions that we came up with you, which you may or may not respond to right now. If you don't, we will present it to you in some other mode. But at any rate, I just want to say those things. So thank you, though. I think this is really, really important work that you're doing, and I'm really eager to follow along and to see it develop into some fabulous plans.
Yeah, there's a lot there, and thank you for your comments. A couple of things. For those that are not familiar, a land value tax is a property tax structure or scheme or approach that if you have lower value or vacant land, that it's taxed at a higher rate than the improvements. And with the idea that a property owner, it's not cheap to sit on a piece of land, and that then sort of encourages or penalizes a property owner to get moving and do something with your land, make it a more productive income generating improvement on the land. The challenge in Oregon is our Measure 5, Measure 50 property tax limits, and sort of that is a larger state issue, constitutional issue, and Rep. Gamba, who represents area sort of uh, Milwaukee, Clackamas County area has taken up this charge, and it's encouraging. And so I think that sort of land value tax approach would be part of our advocacy program. I think what you get into is like, where in the prioritization can it be? What's that level of effort? What is the city's role in supporting sort of the adoption of a land value tax is something that we can get into. To your comment about the survey, I think that's a challenge that we face. A lot of the community presentations we're doing, and many of you here tonight are sort of deeply embedded in these policy discussions. With the survey, we made it more general, and we wanted to hear and try and make it more accessible to regular people. And that it sort of falls upon us as staff to do that interpretation or filtering. Oh, they're talking about larger units. That means these policy choices. Or they're talking about home ownership opportunity. Well, that means this set of policy bundles. And so we purposely, especially for that survey, made it a higher level, more general, to try and make it more approachable or accessible. And then finally, the inventory actions are a little bit more about discovering more about what we have, that existing stock. And it is, and the direction from the state for this exercise is about producing more. And so the why we said that it might have a lower impact is because it is about just finding out what we have. Whereas the state focus is about producing more. And so, when we're looking at sort of allocating city resources, is it about studying more and better understanding our situation, or is it looking at incentives to produce more accessible housing and that sort of thing that might more directly lead to more units as opposed to understanding where we're working from. So just some things there.
Thank you.
All right, there's a bunch more here.
Yeah, so Brian with Our Just Futures put something in the chat, and Brian, I want to invite you to come off mute and speak to that.
Yeah, no, thank you. So our organization, we're primarily focused and based in the numbers, or the communities east of I-205, and we also do a lot of housing for larger families, 2, 3, 4, or 5 bedrooms. And one thing we're really hearing from the families and residents in our current properties is the issue with the lack of adequate, I guess, public transportation in East Portland, even on sites that might be served by a transit line. So for example, we just built and opened last year a new family property on Southeast Stark at about 160th and Southeast Stark, not too far from a Mac stop on East Burnside there, and also served by some bus lines. But we've heard, and so 93 unit project, we provided about 20 on-site parking spots, which is more than we were required to, but we wanted to provide some on-site parking. And we have a lot of families saying there's not enough parking. They're reliant on personal automobiles to get to work and do other things because the public transportation system is not meeting their needs. Either it takes too long, or it's too many transfers, or there's also feelings, and probably legitimately so, of like safety and security, and I think we're all aware of those issues. And so we're kind of at a bind. We're really supportive of one, not wanting to use affordable housing dollars to build parking lots. That's like the worst use of that money, right? And we certainly understand how we want to advance the community's climate goals, but we're also trying to respond to what we're hearing from our residents and needs of parking and accommodating automobiles. So I think the housing production strategy, I'd really like to see how that, can align or support or, call out the need for more transportation investments, especially in some of the, less well-served neighborhoods and communities, because families are really reliant on that. And I think one of the things is, they're not so much wanting to get downtown, they're wanting to get to other areas of employment, which might not be quite how the transit system is designed and oriented. So there's kind of that tension and that need. So yeah, I think housing and transportation go hand in hand and need to be considered together. Yeah.
Yeah, great comment. I think that dilemma around transit access and parking and how mobility for people is something that resonates with me and what we've heard in other forums. And I think, yeah, definitely the strategy itself could do a better job of sort of connecting to our transportation plan and TriMet's transit plans and especially making that link in East Portland. And so that's the kind of insight that we're looking through this outreach process. And so we'll take that back and sort of work with PBOT and TriMet and see what we can come up with to sort of highlight that connection.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. And then if I can, I have another thought on kind of some the question of vacant land redevelopment and an example. And this might get a little technical, but I thought I'd throw it out there just to see what it might do. So we're currently in the process of buying a piece of property that's currently a parking lot that the owner, the business owner doesn't need anymore. To do that, though, we're doing a partition and lot line adjustment. One of the things we've ran into, though, is to get the adjustment and partition done. We have to bring up to current code and standards some of the landscaping and fencing, on parts of the parcel. We'd certainly do that with the development, but in this particular case, we're buying the land now for future development because we want to secure the site and it's available. So and in our discussions with some of the city planners, they get it. And so what it's causing is we're having to spend about $80,000 on landscaping and fencing that could very, very, very well be there for only an interim period, because when we do the actual development, it might have to change or get impacted by construction. And I think the feedback we got from planning was really, they get it, but there's no mechanism within the code currently to kind of allow that like deferral or kind of conditional, I'm probably getting the technical terms wrong, but that kind of conditional, will allow the replat as long as you do because I guess it's that, right, if they allow it now, there's no guarantee that we actually do it in the future. But I think that could be some thinking about that, if there were any ways to kind of massage that could help with some of the vacant or underutilized or redevelopment parcels, where groups could acquire property now but not have the cost of bringing it all up to code right now, but could wait to do that for the actual development.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another great insight. And yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from. In our parlance, it's non-conforming upgrades. And maybe not your specific situation, but we've heard about non-conforming upgrades and the issues that it might present. We did provide some relief, say, for office to housing conversions that don't have to do as many non-conforming upgrades when you're dealing with an existing building. And so I think that the timing, what you're talking about, the timing of it and the situation is certainly something that we could look at and incorporate into one of those reducing barriers to development strategies. Wing, what do you have queued up?
Yeah, so next let's see. Alan has a question. Can you talk about proposal F1's bullet points and how they will reduce barriers to needed accessible housing?
Ooh, all right. Ariel, what's F1?
Great. Yes. F1 is implement accessible housing production strategies. So
Got it.
reducing financial, regulatory, and institutional barriers.
Yeah, so a couple of years ago we had an expert in aging and age-friendly housing and age-friendly cities working in our bureau, and they did a report on a number of different strategies that we could look at to implement. And I think it's really the trade-off, you know, the state building code already requires a certain number of units. I think it's like 10% of the units to be accessible, you know, units, which is, you know, no step entry and wider doorways and uh, grab bars in the bathrooms, those sort of things. Well, those all add costs to the house, to developing the housing. And so I think what we have is a two-pronged strategy there. One is you know, work with the state and the state building code division to sort of increase those requirements and recognize that we have an aging population and we need more of these type of housings, and just make it a requirement, a base requirement, or require more than 10% or whatever I forget the exact number is. But then also what we could do and what we've done in the past is offer incentives, offer a density bonus or a building height bonus, that in exchange for building more of these accessible units, you get to build more units, and sort of work with, and what we have to do with those density bonuses is how do they all stack together? Right now, we prioritize the affordable housing and the inclusionary housing and the affordability issues. But we know we need to do more with accessibility, and we need to do more with larger family size units and other sort of policy priorities, where the biggest tool that the city has is to offer more development density, offer taller buildings. And so, you know, one of the strategies that we have in here, you know, it's probably, what is that, category 3, is to recalibrate that whole range of density and building height bonuses, to look at how all of those fit together. And that's something I think that is high on our list of things to do.
Thanks, Tom. Laura, thank you for your comment in the chat. Can I invite you in to speak to that?
Yes, so I'm interested in the part about promote affordable housing, 0 to 80% AMI. And my question is about targeting development of housing for extremely low income households, so 30% AMI and less. And I kind of looked through that section A, and I don't see anything that's specifically calling out 30% and less AMI housing development. So I wanted you to comment on like how that is going to be addressed, since it says that there's 22% of housing need there. And because it's represents a more, you know, vulnerable community population. Yeah, so could you speak on that?
Yes. So I think that 0 to 30 category and the 30 to 60% AMI income category, that's where most of our public funding has gone towards. The city and the metro regional bonds and the the urban renewal and tax increment financing district money set asides, that really goes to that. I'm not recalling, Ariel, I don't know, does anything come to mind in terms of the specific call out for that 0 to 30 category? That category also really often comes with, I think, Laura, you mentioned this, supportive services, healthcare, mental health care, job training, to really support those residents. But Ariel, do you remember anything specific? And if not, this is the type of comment call out that we would take back to our friends at the Housing Bureau to really work on and address.
Yeah, I think that's a great comment and one we received also from the Fair Housing Council. But I would just point out that I think one strategy where we know we're targeting the 0 to 30% is related to permanent supportive housing, but it's in the stabilization category rather than in the, promoting the development of the new affordable housing units. Yeah, so appreciate the comment.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, if I could, sorry, just, I think the with that 0 to 30% housing production, the key is really the rental assistance and and or the service component. We're seeing operating costs structures that are, essentially at or above, what a 30% rent could pay, and so it's really hard to make a property pencil out, at anything less than 50% AMI, but certainly anything less than 30% without the rental subsidies, which is also always the hard thing to secure and fund and fund on an ongoing basis. I think that's really one of the challenges.
Yeah. Great point.
Thank you. Eric asks, regarding strategy implementation regulatory reform projects, are we considering fast track permits for affordable housing development projects as well?
Yes, and that affordable housing already sort of gets a priority in the queue at the Bureau of Development Services in terms of prioritization in terms of review. But I think that again, that's something that we can call out more intentionally or talk about again with our partners in the development review sector to, what more can we do or need to do in terms of moving things along for affordable housing projects. Interestingly, we've seen other comments from other people, other developers, like we need to expand that program, that, instead of that 0 to 60 category as qualifying, you need to stretch that into the middle income housing, up to 100 or 120% AMI projects as well, that they need to be prioritized or expedited. And so I think they're just in general, there's a lot of need for speeding up the permit process.
Great, thank you. Mary Rain, thank you for the comment in the chat. Can I invite you in to speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just skimming through the document and looking at the adaptive reuse conversion section. I didn't see a call out for hotel conversion, so I just wanted to sort of note that has been something at Central City Concern that we've had a lot of success with in recent years. And as I mentioned, it's both a way to expedite bringing affordable housing units online, as well as, just the adaptive reuse in general being climate friendly. So just wanted to make a note if there's room to reference that in the HPS, and then the specific funding source that I think is a great one to call out and advocate for expansion of is called Project Turnkey. and that is a state level funding source. There have been 2 rounds of it, and we were able to acquire our first of the recent 3 hotels using that source. So just as another one to throw into the basket of fund sources. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, we can add that to our advocacy list.
Great, thank you. And Jennifer has a comment. What about intersectionalities in housing needs? For example, housing that is accessible for people experiencing physical disabilities who fall in the extremely low income bracket.
Yeah. And we have heard that is an issue, and that there are programmatic issues about making sure that the few accessible units that we have are sort of people with disabilities get preference for those units, and sort of being able to match those units. And so I think just and it speaks to the earlier issues about this 0 to 30 income category. It's like, how could I would think that, all of those units should be accessible, right? And so, is that a funding decision? Is that how is it that we sort of put the policies and programs in place to really support that linkage? And again, Ariel reference, we have had an ongoing discussion with the Fair Housing Council of Oregon on how we might, that was one of the issues that came up, and how we might better address that, and make sure that those the accessible units we do create are going to people with disabilities that really most need that.
Thank you. I actually think that we've come to the end of the questions in chat. There's some appreciation from Eric. Thank you for addressing his questions. He's excited to see the final draft of the housing production strategies. We do have time for more questions, or I can give the best gift a facilitator has to give, which is your time back.
I just think, the wide range of issues that we're talking about, it's a lot. And I think the more direction that you can give us on where to prioritize, where to start, that's going to be valuable to us, and sort of the kinds of things that city council is going to want to hear, and our city bureau leadership, in terms of really where to focus our effort, especially in the short term, right? It's easier for us to look out 1 or 2 years, and really be able to tackle some of these issues. And then it's also good to have this long list of good ideas that we can start working off of, and as new projects emerge.
So we have some additional comments from Brian and Jennifer. Brian says there's a meaningful cost increase to make units really accessible. This runs straight into cost containment goals and stretching dollars. I'd love to see a dedicated funding source to add, supplement, and enhance accessibility. It does benefit everyone.
Yeah.
And Jennifer, I couldn't be more thrilled that commercial conversion is being included as a climate-friendly production action. Great. Well, thank you, everyone. I've dropped some links in the chat, ways that you can provide feedback that we've talked about tonight, and then also ways to learn more. There's the HNA and HPS website, and then the link to the draft HPS strategies that we've been discussing tonight. I'll drop those in again. Just so you have them right at the top there. Thank you, Donna. All right, well, thank you everyone so much. I really appreciate you being here. Any last thoughts, Tom, Ariel?
No, again, just sharing the appreciation. This is part of the continuing conversation with Portlanders and sort of continuing to work on housing and housing affordability issues in the city.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Mary Rain. Appreciate that. Okay. Take care, everyone.
All right. Good night.
Good night.